Um, Hello, everyone, and welcome to the official book launch of Bonbon and Blanket by Emily House. I'm really, really honored to be presenting this launch to you today, and very, very honored to introduce this amazing new author and book that she's bringing out. So the book that we are going to be talking about today is Bonbon and Blanket. And we're going to go through a reading of it. So don't worry, kids, you're going to get to hear all the great stories and see all the great pictures from it. But before we kick off, I just wanted to take this moment to introduce our author, Emily House. Emily is an author who resides in Somerset West, and she has previously brought out a book called Earth Takes a Break, which was a wonderful children's book about how Earth just isn't feeling well one day and needs to go to the doctor to get better. And so this is her follow-up title and her debut title with Imagnary House. And at Imagnary House, we are a children's book publishing house. And we are very honored to bring Emily into our ranks as author. And yes, so the book Bonbon and Blanket is an incredibly heartwarming tale about a small child and her best friend, which is a blanket. And they go on these incredible adventures together. You never quite know what they're going to get up to, with a wonderfully kind of diverse family dynamic with a father who sews and wears an apron sometimes. And we're going to find out just what happens on their adventures and what it means to grow up and how you take that friendship forward in life. So without further ado, I'm happy to hand over to Emily to give a bit of context to the book and then go into a reading. All right, Emily.
Thanks, Brad. Oh, I'm so excited. I can't believe I've finally got this book in my hands. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today across the internet. It's really wonderful to have you all here. I'm very excited to share my story with you. So this book, Bonbon and Blanket, was actually inspired by my daughter. I think when we're small, quite a lot of us have a special toy or a treasure that we take everywhere with us. And for my daughter, when she was small, it was her blanket. And I actually have a photo to show you here of what it looks like. I found it yesterday. I dragged through all our photos and I found it. I've printed it out for you. Look. So this is my daughter when she was small, which is about 14 years ago now, and this is her special blanket that she had, and she did lots of different things with it, and that inspired me for the book. And now my daughter is nearly 16, and the blanket looks a little bit different, and I had to ask her ever so nicely if she'd be willing to let me show the blanket today, and she kindly agreed. Thank you, Rosie. Here it is. Look how different it looks now. It's just a grey piece of fleece, but she loves it very dearly, and she said, "You mustn't say anything bad about this blanket, Mummy, if I let you show it to the people." So here we go. This is the blanket. It's very much loved, and it's still not very far from her side, and it's very similar to Bonbon's relationship with her friend Blanket. So are you ready? And we'll read the story together, and I'd like you to see if you can spot not just Bonbon and Blanket, but a couple of other friends that go along the way too. Here we go. Bonbon and Blanket were best of friends from the moment they first found each other. Bonbon was tiny, in need of some warmth, and Blanket a soft, cozy cover. Everywhere Bonbon went, Blanket went too. They loved to adventure together. To the shops with Dad, or with Mum to the park, side by side, whatever the weather. Can you see all the different things that are going on in the park there? And how the seasons are changing from spring to summer, autumn and winter? Blanket was the perfect parachute. for a daredevil flying high in the sky. Blanket was the cleverest hiding place when the scary monsters came by. Is that a scary monster, do you think? Or is it just a tiny spider? Blanket was easily the finest sail to help conquer the 7 seas. Blanket was the comfiest hammock for relaxing with a good book to read. Blanket was a magical tent on a rainy afternoon. Blanket was the greatest companion for gazing at the stars and the moon. Brave Blanket even survived the trials of Dad's spring cleaning routine, spinning around and around and around in the suds of the washing machine. One day they were all on a picnic, and Bonbon was down by the lake, when suddenly a dog snatched Blanket and tried to make its escape. "Oh no!" cried Mum. "Cheeky dog!" exclaimed Dad. Bonbon ran after the dog. "Come back here with my friend!" Bonbon shouted as it hurdled a big wooden log. Oh dear, doesn't look good, does it? Soon Bonbon caught up and, with no thought of peril, began to battle the hound. Bonbon tried and tried, but the great tug of war soon saw Blanket in shreds on the ground. Oh, Bonbon looks sad there. That night, Bonbon lay face in the pillow, crying, lonely and sad. Life would be empty without Blanket. But I'll make a plan, thought Dad. So while Bonbon slept, Dad picked up Blanket and all of the crumpled threads. He grabbed his torch, made a mug of hot tea, and marched down to the garden shed. I know it's here somewhere, he thought to himself. I wish I was more organized. He rummaged and managed to find what was needed to make Bonbon a special surprise. What's going on there? You see the cat, and I'm not sure if the cat's really helping or perhaps just really not helping. Bonbon woke the next morning and sleepily got out of bed, just in time to see Dad run triumphantly up the path from his garden shed. Wonder what he's got there. Surprise! Cheered Dad excitedly, a parcel clutched tight in his hand, carefully wrapped in newspaper and held by 3 rubber bands. Blanket was broken, too broken to fix, and I know how that made you so sad. But I've worked through the night with my needle, and now Blanket's torn threads are a bag. Oh, look at that. Look at Bonbon's face. So whenever you're lonely, you can be sure that Blanket's still there, not as a warm, cozy cover, but at this bag you can wear. Oh, Blanket, smiled Bonbon, I love the new you. Dear Dad, you are so very clever. Reunited, the 2 friends went off to enjoy more happy adventures together. And here you can see Bonbon's a little bit bigger there and looking to climb a mountain with the bag that now was Blanket.
Such an incredible story. Thank you so much,
you.
Emily. That this is really one of my favorite books that I've worked on as publisher. And there's just such special moments in the book as well. In particular, I think I love the scene where the dad is working in the shed on Blanket, and you don't know what Blanket's going to become, but you know there's some kind of transformation that's happening, and it's so special. So thank you all for listening to the reading. I'm going to take away the book from the screen right now. And yes, so what we're going to do next is have a little bit of a question and answer session between myself and Emily. I am the publisher who worked on Bonbon and Blanket, together with the creative director at Imagnary House. And so I have a little bit of interesting questions for Emily about the process going through publishing, as well as kind of what the book means to her. Yeah, so let's dive into it. And please do, if you have any questions at all, be sure to ask them in the comments, and we're going to answer all of them at the end of the call. Or if there's a lot, we'll answer as many as we can get to. So firstly, I think we all want to know, what was your blanket growing up? Did you have a blanket, or was it a toy or an imaginary friend? But what was your childhood blanket?
Yeah, so I didn't have a blanket, but I did have quite a few special teddies. I actually still have the one that was most special to me. My son looks after him now, and I called him Captain. He's since got the addition of a homemade football shirt that my son made him at one point. But yeah, he's been through quite a few adventures with me too. And I think a lot of us had sort of similar experiences, whether it was an imaginary friend and all the different places you could go in your imagination. You might still be stuck in your house, but you could actually be sailing on the ocean as a pirate, or you could be leaping off sand dunes, pretending to like be a parachutist. So that's the wonderful thing about imagination. It is limitless. It's only restricted by the things that we can think.
That's brilliant. That's and I really love that you still have that with you to this day.
I'm a bit of a sentimentalist, I think.
Which is something I think you've imparted into Bonbon, something she'll carry with her into her life in literature.
I hope so.
I wanted to know, have you always enjoyed telling stories and writing stories, or is this a new adventure for you? I know that you have been an illustrator for some time, but yeah, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think in some shape or form, I've always told stories. I did love to write short stories and draw pictures to go with them when I was young. And then as I grew older, I moved into, grown-up life and moved into television, which again was learning. It was telling stories, but in a different way through film. And then I moved into marketing, which was telling stories about all the different amazing things that different companies and businesses do. So I guess storytelling has always sort of been woven into my life, but it only came back to me in a couple of years ago how much I loved just making up stories. And so when my children were a little bit older and they didn't quite need so much of my physical time, I had space to be a bit more creative again and start putting pen to paper again and messing around and seeing what I could come up with.
That's brilliant. That's well, I'm glad you did.
Thank you.
Because it's resulted in the story that we have today. And for the younger listeners and readers out there, what was your kind of like writing and illustrating process? And for especially, I think, aspiring authors and those who hope to be an author one day, what wisdom can you share with them?
Well, I think firstly, the thing is that there's no rules. Again, it's your imagination, which is the key to it all. And just to start practicing and not be too worried about getting it right from the beginning. If you've got the seed of an idea, you can write it down. So I have a special book here that my husband bought me, and I have pieces of Bonbon and Blanket in here from when I first thought about the story, and I've got scribblings. I've even got a few tiny little doodles. I don't know if you can see that here of Bonbon, and it's, I think, learning just to play around a little bit and experiment and just see where your imagination takes you. And then from there, you'll start to kind of hone it down and go, okay, well, that works really well. I'll keep that bit and I'll get rid of that bit. Not being scared to get rid of some good bits too, if it doesn't really work for the story.
I think that's also something we had to talk through definitely in the development of this book, where you definitely, speaking from a publisher's perspective, you come from a different perspective looking at a book when you're making it, and often you want a line tweaked that ends up, you then find out is quite a sentimental line to the author, which leads to very interesting discussions. And but yeah, it's always, I think, a collaboration, which is something I can definitely back what you're saying there, Emily. That's I think very, very good advice to aspiring authors. You do have to be free and willing to listen as well. The publishers need to be willing to learn from the authors too.
Well, even with this one, we took like a whole verse out, didn't we? Quite last minute. So you have to be willing to be flexible, which it is hard sometimes, but it's also part of the wonderful journey of making a book. Even though I wrote it and I illustrated it, with Imaginary House, it's a team effort. So we all work together, and it actually makes it stronger as a result.
Oh, well, that's nice to hear. Before we go into, I want to talk a little bit about what you found interesting in the process of developing it. But before we go into that, I'm just intrigued, and I think I've asked you this before, but for the readers, why did you choose the name Bonbon? I think Blanket is a fairly obvious name, but yeah.
Well, it was a couple of reasons. Firstly, I wanted, because it's a rhyming story, I wanted to find a name for the child that mirrored Blanket, so that it had the same syllables and it also began with the same letter, so it alliterated. So that was one reason. But the second reason was I wanted a pet name that wasn't an actual normal child's name. It was a pet name that was kind of probably just used within the family, that was a bit unusual, that people would go, oh, why are they called Bonbon, but the family would know it was an in-joke. And also it's quite nice, a lot of you probably know a bit of French, but bonbon is, the word for sweetie in French, which I thought was quite cute as well.
Yeah, that's I think what's great about it as well. It's got a lot of double meanings. That's I think it's always special to hear what's behind a name. It makes a character more meaningful, I think, and then you find out it's also far more intentional than you ever realized. On that, and we've spoken a little bit in this now before, but I remember you submitted the draft of the manuscript to us, and you had a few sample illustrations to go along with it. But how did you find the publishing and development process with a publisher and a creative director? Can you kind of speak through that and also tell people a little bit kind of like what it was like to go through that as an author?
Yeah, so basically when I came up with the story, I'd written it in my book and I'd started to sort of get some pictures together in my head, and I was thinking, well, how am I going to get this book into the world? I'd not tried to do anything like that before. And so I went onto the internet and I started searching, and I came across Imaginary House and I thought, oh, that's great. They're local. I love, being part of a local setup. And then I looked and I thought, oh, hang on a minute, they're open for submissions. And I went, well, that's amazing. That's pretty cool. I could probably get it all together ready to submit. And so, yes, I compiled my documents and I put together a proposal and I submitted to you guys. And then I waited. And you have to be very patient. Everybody tells you have to be patient because poor old Imaginary House have a lot of people who want to submit stories to them, and they have to carefully go through all of them. And I was just overjoyed when I received an email a few months later from yourself, and the process began. And actually, it was at that point where it kind of got the rocket to really get going. And I think the wonder of being supported by you as a publishers and with the art director just made it a really strong product. And I loved the fact that I had enough creative freedom, but you respected all of that, but you kind of gradually coached me into how it could best work, because your experience is what was needed, you know. So we started putting all the words together properly first, and we refined all of that, and then I put together this. It's like, it looks like a comic strip, and we had some rough ideas, and then the art director kind of came back and with some sort of changes and suggestions, and then from there we sort of built the book, and it all gradually the pieces puzzled together.
Yeah, it's I think that's one of the most exciting things about the publishing process, at least from our perspective, and many authors I think don't realize this, of how much of a collaborative effort it is. And I think, yeah, that's something that I think a lot of authors often feel like they're going to be alone in it, or the opposite, that they feel they're going to hand off their work and then not be involved at all, which are both extremely scary situations. But yeah, I'm glad that we got to collaborate on it and actually work together. I think that it was definitely an honor and something very exciting to work on this book.
I think we have to work so much harder when you've got the pictures and the words fitting together, that they actually knit together nicely, and they kind of strengthen each other rather than one pulling one way and one pulling the other way. So it's quite a kind of a magical recipe when it finally comes out the other end, and it works. It's quite impressive.
Exactly. Yeah. Going into the story a little bit, because I think people are interested perhaps in the characters. I don't know if everyone feels this way, but I particularly love the father character, and even during kind of developing it and considering the submission, I think he was one of the things that really drew me to the story. And there's just so much to him. But I was wondering if you modeled him after a real life person, or if he came totally out of your imagination. What were you trying to also kind of get across with that character?
Okay, so the dad himself really was a kind of a combination of lots of different people I've witnessed across the years. My dad and my husband is a dad to our children. So he definitely was kind of a mixture of all those different things. But I think the reason why he is an interesting character is because I wanted to sort of do a shout out to the dad. So I feel they kind of get a bit of a very bland, sort of one-dimensional rep a lot of the time in books, and stereotypically it's just the dad. He goes off to work. He doesn't really necessarily do much with the kids, and that we all know that isn't the case at all. Most dads are very involved and have lots of different skills, and they're not necessarily just, I don't know, doing what is typically known as manly things, and they muck in with the housework and all that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to show that kind of family, to make it a bit more normal, really. Like, this is normal. We have all different types of family setups, and yeah, the dad is one of those. I think as parents, we're more than just parents, aren't we? We are, we've had lives beforehand, and so I expect this dad perhaps was a cobbler in a past life before he or something like that, So
I would love to think that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's nice to imagine those things in the background that you don't really know what the dad did, but that there's more to him than just being a dad, or going off to work. He's multifaceted.
I think that's really important, I think, because it does break gender roles, the book. I think not in an extremely obvious way, but quite subtly, and it's gentle, which I think is really important. And I think it's also important to promote the kind of message that this father does, in which he is involved in the house. And like you say, it's great that there are many fathers who are like that, but I think it's also important that we want to convey in literature what we hope a family represents. And so I think we should see more of this. I suppose that was going to be my next question, but I think you've answered it. Was it intentional to do that? And I think you said
yes,
it was.
It definitely was. I definitely wanted to show that there could be, all different types of families in existence, and there is no normal. We're all different, which is one of the most beautiful things in life, really.
Yeah, and I think the coming right off that as well, it's another wonderful thing about the book is the diverse family makeup, which I think is fantastic for a very similar reason. I don't think we see enough of that in children's books, but we are seeing slowly more of it. Can you share why you thought this was an important thing to include in your book? Because I remember you were quite specific about wanting it to be like that as well.
Yeah. I think, to be inclusive, really, because if we just keep producing books with very stereotypical families, it can be quite upsetting, I think, for children who can't see families that potentially look like their families. And so to be able to create a book where some kids can go, okay, that looks a bit like my family, that's pretty cool, but also it shows them that, and shows people who don't have families like that there are different types of families. So it kind of operates well, and the more we can produce books like this, the more it becomes just an everyday thing, and it doesn't actually have to be a talking point. That would be the best, wouldn't it?
that would be the best. That's what we want at the end of the day, really. But thank you, Emily. I think those points also, I'm sure, will lead to a few questions in the comments. One question because next up, what we do have is some audience questions that we'll be answering, but a question we've had is to reread the book. I wonder if you'd be willing, if I shared it again, just to reread it for those who missed out.
Of course, I'd be delighted.
All right, let's do that. And then, yes, to everyone listening, as soon as we finished the second reading, we will be answering some of your questions.
Okay.
All right.
This is the story of Bonbon and Blanket. Bonbon and Blanket were best of friends from the moment they first found each other. Bonbon was tiny, in need of some warmth, and Blanket a soft, cozy cover. Everywhere Bonbon went, Blanket went too. They loved to adventure together, to the shops with Dad, or with Mum to the park, side by side, whatever the weather. Blanket was the perfect parachute for a daredevil flying high in the sky. Blanket was the cleverest hiding place when the scary monsters came by. Blanket was easily the finest sail to help conquer the 7 seas. Blanket was the comfiest hammock for relaxing with a good book to read. Blanket was a magical tent on a rainy afternoon. Blanket was the greatest companion for gazing at the stars and the moon. Brave Blanket even survived the trials of Dad's spring cleaning routine, spinning around and around and around in the suds of the washing machine. One day they were all on a picnic, and Bonbon was down by the lake, when suddenly a dog snatched Blanket and tried to make its escape. "Oh no," cried Mum. "Cheeky dog," exclaimed Dad. Bonbon ran after the dog. "Come back here with my friend," Bonbon shouted, as it hurdled a big wooden log. Soon Bonbon caught up, and with no thought of peril, began to battle the hound. Bonbon tried and tried, but the great tug of war soon saw Blanket in shreds on the ground. That night Bonbon lay, face in the pillow, crying, lonely and sad. Life would be sad without Blanket, but I'll make a plan, thought Dad. So while Bonbon slept, Dad picked up Blanket and all of the crumpled threads. He grabbed his torch, made a mug of hot tea, and marched down to his garden shed. I know it's here somewhere, he thought to himself. I wish I was more organised. He rummaged and managed to find what was needed to make Bonbon a special surprise. Bonbon woke the next morning and sleepily got out of bed, just in time to see Dad run triumphantly up the path from his garden shed. Surprise! Cheered Dad excitedly, a parcel clutched tight in his hands, carefully wrapped in newspaper and held by 3 rubber bands. Blanket was broken, too broken to fix, and I knew how that made you so sad. But I've worked through the night with my needle, and now Blanket's torn threads are a bag. So, whenever you're lonely, you can be sure that Blanket's still there, not as a warm, cozy cover, but as this bag you can wear. Oh, Blanket, smiled Bonbon, I love the new you. Dear Dad, you are so very clever. Reunited, the 2 friends went off to enjoy more happy adventures together. The end.
Thanks so much, Emily. I hope everyone listening enjoyed the second reading, and those of you who missed the first one got to hear it that time. Yeah, it's I think a lovely book. As someone says in the comments, thank you, Alan Durant.
Hi, Alan.
Yeah, so I think we have a question from the comments on some illustration process. I wonder if you can answer that. What medium did you use for the illustrations?
Well, I start off doing scribbles in my red book, like I said, but then I very quickly move on to my trusty friend, the iPad. And I use the Apple Pencil with a piece of software called Procreate, and it is amazing. And it feels like you're drawing on real paper, but you can undo as many times as you want, which I'm always very thankful for.
That's yeah, it was actually an interesting process to see it, kind of the story taking place on paper first and then moving to digital. And I think what's great is you can definitely see it's withheld some of that kind of hand-drawn style and elements. So I think there is...
that was quite important to me to kind of keep it kind of quite organic looking, and sort of vintagey vibes, you know, because I feel like it's a bit of a sort of like I said, a bit of a sentimental story. So
well, we've got some some just I think very congratulatory comments coming through, and people identifying with your shared story of the teddy. But yeah, I think we don't have any more questions. If we do, please post them now. But otherwise, I think we can begin to wrap up. And thank you all for joining our book launch. We have a few interesting announcements before we do close up. Firstly, I would like to say that Emily is going on a virtual book tour in the coming month. So if you've enjoyed seeing her here and hearing about the story, she will be having an interview with Afro Daddy. The book will be getting reviewed with, again, Kids and Case YouTube channel. And you can go to either Imaginary House's or Emily's Instagram page to find out the dates and locations of where those will be shared. But yeah, we do hope to see you all there. And one important thing, on the 15th of May at 11 a.m., we invite you to come in person to Exclusive Books in Cavendish Mall in Cape Town. And Emily will be doing a live book reading there and answering some of your questions. And if you hope to get a book signed, that would be your opportunity. And one last, I think, very exciting announcement that we can say is, if you haven't purchased a book yet, there's an upcoming partnership with Mango. If you don't know Mango, they are fabric producers locally, and they create amazing, well, they have created an amazing blanket inspired by Bonbon's Blanket. And we'll be doing a short run with them that can be purchased as a bundle, so the blanket and the book together, which is, I think, fantastic that you can get the real life blanket to hold. And so, yeah, you can watch our social media and Mango's for the details on that. And all profits from those sales will be getting donated to Shine Literacy, which I think is also quite an exciting thing as well, to be promoting that in our country. So we do hope to see your support for that. And otherwise, if you do have any further questions, always feel free to reach out to us on social media or Emily. And yeah, we are always happy to hear from interested readers. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.